Yo, what's up, everybody? It's an Overreaction Monday right here. Orange Blood's live. I'm Jeff Ketchum. That is Anwar Richardson. We're going to be with you for a little while talking about Humpty Dumpty splattered all over the Guadalupe. Well, Guadalupe and MLK and every other street on the 40 acres that a piece of egg can be splattered on. Do us a solid, like the video, subscribe to the channel. Even if you're upset right now, we're going to help work our way through what today is. It's the Monday of Texas OU. We're still rehashing what happened Saturday in Gainesville. And the video is brought to you by the guys over at Rogue Shop. I do want to say, it was a Rogue Shop weekend. The Slap Yo Mama grape gummies, Anwar. You can see that we've been into this jar.
See. How many milligrams is that?
250.
Woo! Yeah.
And then,
okay.
Depending on what you need, sativa, indica, hybrid. We would do a little bit of everything to get to the weekend. It was that kind of weekend. Guys, go to Rogue Shop, get your Orange Bloods on by using that promo code. Onward, where do we even start? Humpty Dumpty fell off the wall. They got to get it put back together in time for Saturday's game where this thing really goes off the rail. As I wrote about in my column, my 10 thoughts from the weekend, there's so many things that are wrong and haven't been addressed. It's almost impossible to know exactly where to start, especially when some of the things that we'll talk about can't be saved now. We're going to talk about offensive line and the portal and the decisions that were made. Dude, it's week 6. There are 7 regular season games left to play. Yeah. There are just some things that they are what they are, and they got to try to mitigate some of these disasters as best as possible.
Yeah, I mean, for me, Catch, it's almost like when you start somewhere and then you work your way out, right? In this exercise, I think you start with Sarkisian, right? And not that even before we get to what could have done or can't be done or should have been done, I think we start talking about how important this week is for him. You and I have talked about this before. Going in the off season, and I know I've talked a lot about it, which was he's had a good run as far as a honeymoon is concerned. But you're getting dangerously close to the honeymoon thing is over. And we've talked about before, Catch, where it's not your job's in jeopardy. We're not nothing crazy like that. But you're at the point where now it's the whole, it's year one, shine is that, okay, that's fine, right? But then you've set an expectation over the last 2 years, Catch, of this is what Texas football is. This is our standard. The standard is the standard. All these things. And then we're just being quite honest with you. This team has has not looked good all year long. And you go into this Texas OU weekend, and this is get back for OU. Some major get back here. And you drop this game, rivalry game, and OU's the one that pushes you off the ledge. As bad as it is at this point, if OU is the one that pretty much ends all your hopes and dreams, it's an ugly place for Sark over the rest of the rest of October and November before we even get into December. And I don't want to use hyperbole, Catch, where you say this is the biggest week of someone's career. No, it's not that. But wherever it ranks, it's one of his biggest weeks. Not because it's oh my gosh of a success rate, but it's huge as far as the failure component. Because if you fail again this weekend, whatever this week looks like, it's 10 times worse next week.
It feels like the first thing that has to be addressed in some form or fashion. And I don't know how they do it because I'm going to say what needs to happen, and I don't know that there's a pathway for it to happen. This team can't be competitive at a remotely high level if the offensive line play can't just be average. This does not have to be as good as last year's offensive line, which we know by the time we get to the semifinals or a national championship game probably isn't good enough. But Texas had an offensive line a year ago that was good enough to pretty easily walk through most of its schedule and win some playoff games and get to the national semifinal. And then there's a conversation about, well, can you block Georgia? Can you block Ohio State? Which is just a different level of conversation versus can you block anyone?
Can you block UTEP?
We're just at a point right now where this Texas offensive line, where the move to move Nick Brooks, the third starting left guard in 5 weeks, he's not good or ready enough to play. Period. Not at tackle, not at guard. He does not need to be playing. He doesn't need to be playing any more than Cole Hudson needed to be playing as a true freshman in 2022. These are things that when you put yourself into a position where you have no other options, They're not going to – I don't know that Arch Manning survives the Oklahoma game on Saturday if they can't protect him a little bit better. And I don't care if they get holding penalties, whatever. You can't be terrible. And it doesn't feel like – look, I don't feel like I'm asking a lot of Kyle Flood at this point. I'm not asking for a plus offensive line. I'm not asking for guys to be All-Americans or All-SEC. They can be Jags. Because you know what happens when 5 Jags line up on the offensive line? They probably don't give up 35 quarterback pressures in a game because they're Jags. They're just guys. They're not terrible, but they're not great. What's happening right now is Texas up front. This is Charlie Strong level of incompetence. This is, hey, is that Tristan Nicholson out there? No, it's just everybody else. It is. These are guys that should not be playing at this level, and they're being forced to play for a variety of reasons. If that can't get better, I don't know how Arch Manning can get better. I don't know how the running game, which has a bunch of Jags at running back, can get better. You don't have speed at receivers. You lack game breakers. First and foremost, you got to be able to block somebody. And I had somebody ask me this weekend, buy or sell. I think the Texas running backs will gain 75 yards rushing or more against Oklahoma. Sell. We're not there yet. They didn't break 15 combined yards against Florida. So I don't know. I think you can't fix the personnel you don't have. They can't go into the portal right now and get a running back. They can't go get speed at receiver. They can't get offensive linemen, whether they would get them or not. You got to work with what you've got. And if you're getting paid almost $2 million a year as a coordinator or over $1 million a year as a position coach, and these are the guys you wanted, you got to find a way to make them passable. And I think the thing that has Texas fans really alarmed from Saturday is that they saw shit on Saturday they know can't get fixed next week.
No.
You can't. And it is the cloud onward that's hovering above this program going in to the OU game. Now, look, we've been here before. This does have a very 2015 Charlie Strong shows up and everybody's ready to bury him with a loss, and then we get the finger-pointing photo, and all that did was eventually delay the inevitable of what we knew was actually existing inside the Charlie Strong program at the time. So we know that the upsets can happen. We know that teams can win this game when they're not expected to. But so much has to change from Saturday because Oklahoma is a better version of Florida.
Florida, if we just put this in perspective, was one of the worst teams in the SEC. Now, we can go on the, you know what, this conference is so tough. Every game's a tough game, blah, blah, blah. Well, I don't know. USF beat Florida, okay? And I say this as a USF grad, but I have to also say that as a USF grad.
Who knew that you were going to weaponize your former student status at South Florida in such a way?
In such a way in Texas, right? Who would ever thought these worlds would ever collide, right? But we can't ignore, Catch, that Billy Napier was 4 quarters away from potentially losing his job over the weekend. Catch, if Texas goes and beats down Florida in a way that prior to the season we thought could have happened. Billy Napier is another one of these coaches, like Sam Pittman, who's fired early in the season. And it doesn't happen against a team that only had 3 sacks going into that game against Texas. And they look like Georgia's defensive line from a year ago, right? They look like freaking world beaters. And that is the scary part, because UTEP was able to get pressure on this offensive line. And it's like that. The thing about Ohio State was you were able to kind of lie to yourself about some of the things that you saw, because you're like, it's Ohio State, right? That's defending national champs. But then we haven't really seen, and hell, they probably played a little bit better then, but we haven't seen this offensive line get better. And when you're 5 games in, yes, like you can't make this line better. And when I say the line, Catch, specifically the interior guys more so than anything else, right? I'm not really even talking about the edge guys as much. What I'm really talking about is on the inside. What Sark has to do, Catch, they just got to get rid of the ball fast. Like this offensive line is not going to give Arch Manning enough time for a play to develop down the field. It just won't. He's getting killed waiting that 2 to 3 Mississippi for somebody to potentially get open. I mean, it has to be, Catch. It's got to be sometimes old saying, Catch, is a 3-yard pass is sometimes as good as a 3-yard run. Like, you might have to be at that point where you just got to get it out of the hands of Arch faster, because and Arch is probably going to have to make his reads a little bit quicker as well, Catch, because he may have to go first, second read and get the hell out, because if not, Catch, he's not going to – look, I don't want to be that guy. He's not going to last this season the way this line is playing. He just won't. Like, they're getting him killed, and it's unfair to him.
I will say maybe my biggest overreaction, I've now gone back and watched the game a couple of times.
Okay.
It was not fun. I, in retrospect, kind of wish I just watched the Red Zone channel instead and just baked on the NFL for a day, but the NFL was kind of boring yesterday too, so maybe I didn't miss much. I felt coming out of the game that I saw more good than bad from Arch. He wasn't good. Like, the final numbers are what the final numbers are, and like, we're not rewriting what's an acceptable quarterback performance in Austin. The numbers wouldn't have been good enough if they're Quinn. They weren't good enough for Arch. But for the first time this season, I saw a quarterback. He seemed weirdly comfortable being asked to do everything. Like, that is, it's really almost impossible to wrap my head around what was happening in the first 3 games of the season, where he was throwing ground balls, where he was clearly rushing and his mechanics were off. Look, there were parts to pick apart from Saturday, but he made plays. I stopped thinking he was incapable, and it actually crossed my mind. Could he drag this team back to overtime? Like, he was on the offense for the first time this season, probably the best thing about the offense. Like, I was encouraged I thought if that Arch Manning had traveled to Columbus, Texas might have beaten Ohio State with the Arch Manning that they got on Saturday. Doesn't mean he was great, but he was better than terrible, which is pretty much what he was against Ohio State. They need more of that Arch and around that Arch, because some of the interceptions were he just a guy trying to make anything happen. I can forgive some of the mistakes that he made, given the context and the nonstop pressure that he was under. They need more of that on Saturday. They need more of that the rest of the season. That guy is a guy that's growing and evolving, and I could see the progress. Does it mean they won't go 7-5 or 8-4 this season with him at quarterback? I don't know. Not automatically. It does not mean that he's good enough to save the ship. But it means for the first time this season, he looked like a guy that wasn't responsible for the fact that the ship was going down. And they've got to find a way. I think it's about the Sarkisian offense. I think Sark wants this team to do what he wants to do. I don't see an offense right now that's tailor-made for the personnel. I see an offense that's being asked to do what Steve Sarkisian asks his personnel to do every single year. He wants them to be multiple. He wants, they've got this offensive line doing different blocking schemes in the middle of games. They can't quite decide what kind of run team they want to be. There's no speed at receiver. Maybe stop waiting for Arch to find guys 50 yards down the field when it takes them 5 seconds to get there. There's a lot going on. I don't know that this team has remotely close to a bread and butter on offense going into Saturday, the 6th game of the season. And Anwar, in a rivalry game, I don't know what the best thing this offense does. Maybe Arch taking off and running whenever he's pressured and gets I don't know. You tell me, it's late fourth quarter on Saturday against OU, and OU is up 24-23. And Texas has the ball 1st and 10 from its own 25. What plays do they go? What's their go-to in that situation?
And seriously, it's probably an Arch scramble. He's their leading rusher, right? There's nothing that you can say, I know you can hang your hat on this or this particular person, running back, receiver, anything like that. It's your most dynamic plays. And again, Parker Livingstone, he had a great play, right? That was, that was a great catch. But if you're talking about your most consistent, you saw a glimpse of it. The thing that this is the thing. Sark, his battle is Arch, and I've said this before, Catch. Arch is a dual threat quarterback that Sarkisian is saying, I just prefer for you to be a drop back passer. And the thing that it's literally, and here's your overreaction Monday. It's literally like telling Vince Young, don't use your legs. We'll use your legs every once in a while. And we know this is good, but we know you can do this fantastic, Vince. We understand this could be a huge asset for us. But Vince, we just don't want you to do that. We just want you to do our system. Now, every once in a while, it's okay. And I think if Sark just said, I know that I have this system, but I know this is my quarterback, and this is his skill set, then I think if he says that, then you're able to get that, I'm not saying I'm using this as a comparison, but then you're able, when we look at Vince and that score that he has against USC, Catch, right? That was instinctual. You know what? Do what you do. And you have the green light. You got the green light to take off whenever the hell you want to, man, because that's your skill set. And I think if he took the reins off and just said, hey, man, this is what we ain't got a line that can block for you, man. So we don't need the elite line. But Vince couldn't be Vince if he was coached by Sark.
Well, it's funny. We're in the middle of year 3 of Art.
Yeah.
At this exact moment in Vince Young's career, in the middle of his 3rd season in Austin, that people were ready to move him to wide receiver. In fact, it was going into this game in his 3rd year where the offense got shut out against Oklahoma in a 12-0 loss. And it took Vince Young going into Greg Davis, the Texas offensive coordinator's office, and saying, yo, man, you got to let me be me. Let me be me, and I'll cook. And it's wild that, I'm not real comfortable making the Vince Young analogies, but he was brought up. And it is interesting that there are parallels to his situation. There are parallels of this season with 2010. I mentioned in my column that it was 15 years ago this week that Texas fell out of the top 25 in 2010, the AP top 25, after being preseason number 4. Texas this year, preseason number 1, they just fell out of the AP top 25, a historic collapse. It's never happened before in the modern. They beat 2012 USC, which, that was a Lane Kiffin coach team that he got fired on the tarmac when that happened. Like, I just Sark's got to really do as good of a job coaching this week as he's done in a long time. I've got a question I want to ask you, but I want to knock out these super chats because they're stacking up. Let's just knock them out real quick. Started with Joey for $5. I've been thinking about this. Is Sark like Arteta? Also, Hala Madrid, Inada Mas. No, man, I think that's insulting to Arteta a little bit because, Joey, I think as a non-Arsenal fan that Arteta sets up Arsenal incredibly well. They don't have the issues that Texas has. The issues that Arteta has, and you could ask Arsenal fans about this, is that sometimes he's a little too conservative and they want him to be a little more on the front foot, put a little more attacking on the pitch. That's not really what's happened. So I won't say that Sark's like Arteta, but I know where you're going with that, but it doesn't seem fair. I don't think, because Arsenal's constantly wanting Arteta to be more aggressive, and Sark may be too aggressive, weirdly enough, or not aggressive enough when it comes to the offensive line. But
I'll still take a 2-0 victory versus West Ham, so it is what it is.
No, I'm
in a 0-2 loss.
Hey, I'm defending the Arsenal manager. I don't even like Mikel Arteta. How is Texas favored against OU? Patrick says, well, they've been favored. I think the big thing is, it would appear that Vegas is not anticipating that Oklahoma will have its starting quarterback. Texas is a 3.5, 4.5 point favorite right now. That's on a neutral field. If OU has its starting quarterback, the line's probably reversed. Keep an eye on that, though. That also might just be Vegas taking advantage of Texas betting.
They are taking the money of Texas fans this year, and they want Texas fans to put that money on Texas. And that line is going to drop, but they want that Texas money because it's been good money for them so far.
Josh for $4.99 says, we've known this staff has in-game issues, but I never really questioned roster construction before this year. That's the scary thing.
Yeah.
Anwar, we talked about this months ago. Sark went out of his way to tell us that he loved this team. He loved the culture. He loved the talent. He did not put his foot on the brake with regards to expectations the way that he did last week when suddenly 9-3 is not a terrible season, and people should probably know that popped up. That he misread he's the guy that's there every day. I've been doing some self-evaluation. It's part of the question I want to ask you here in a second. There were signs that this thing wasn't what it needed to be. And look, for a guy that picked Texas to be the national championship game, I loudly missed sticking with the signs. I deemed my thoughts to outweigh the importance of the obvious concerns. I gave a little bit too much benefit of the doubt. I'm going to ask you about that in a second, but the roster construction, the thing that's scary is that they had the money. I talked to money guys. Tell us what you need, because the thing that Texas has been pretty consistent about this since they had Charlie and Tom. They don't ever want a guy to get fired from Texas and that coach to be able to say, we didn't give that coach enough to work for. They refuse to do it. So whenever Texas has gone small on things, that's a head coaching decision. You didn't tell me. I've never had anybody tell me we didn't do this and Sark wanted us to. That's just never happened. I was told they went in the offseason and told Sark, man, if you want one of these fast receivers, if you want Eric Singleton, dude, we'll go out and get it. And the thought was, no, like it would cost $2 million to get a guy like that. And they just didn't do it. They just didn't do it. And they're just left with now. I'm going to bring up the next super chat from JP via 13. Need 23 Texas Bama offensive approach. They can't do that. Do you realize that the game plan in 23 against Alabama was for Quinn to execute, quite frankly, a game plan that they seldom executed well. Those moon balls that he threw to Worthy and Adonai Mitchell were dependent on those receivers beating their DBs down the field vertically and then making great in-ball adjustments, which completely, to be fair, that is not what Xavier Worthy was well known for in his career at Texas. But that night, what an adjustment he made on that ball in midair. What a ball Ewers threw. Same with Adonai Mitchell later in the game. They don't have 4.3 speed first day NFL talent at wide receiver. They just don't. And I don't know. I don't think you can do Texas. Sark onwards got to find the right 2025 approach. And it feels like from week to week, they're guessing, going back to approaches that they've used in other games with other teams and other players because it worked then. I mean, the hard part about this week is I don't know how to tell them to fix it. I can point out what's wrong. Oh, I'm an expert at that this week. This is wrong. That is wrong. You're wrong. He's wrong. I'm wrong. I got a bunch of wrong stuff. I don't know what the game plan is to beat Oklahoma this weekend other than it can't be shit. They cannot show up and attempt to be what they were last weekend because Arch Manning won't survive another game like that. He's lucky that he walked out of that game on Saturday without a concussion, without a broken collarbone. Like they were teeing off on him. And, you know, it's a feather in his cap that he survived that a little bit. Like I know this, Arch is tough. He may not be good yet, but I know Arch will leave it all on the field. So lesson learned. But how about not ask him to leave his soul on the field for the W? Like, maybe some other guys got to leave some souls on the field. And that's the other thing, Anwar. This team was so ill-prepared on Saturday. It is, for me, the worst first quarter performance of the Sark era. A quarter where they're usually very good. The offense is usually very good. They were manhandled. It was 10-0. I didn't feel like anybody other than Ty Anthony Smith even showed up in the first quarter. How did that team show up not ready to play? And you know what? It was the difference in the game. Texas was better than Florida over the course of the final three quarters. But they were outplayed and so ill-prepared to start that game that they put themselves in a deficit they couldn't overcome. They put themselves into a position where they had to chase the score as opposed to just about anything else. And it was a day where the defense kind of played like crap. We knew there would be games at some point this season where the defense would give up 20 plus, and the question was always going to be, on a day when they did that, could the offense overcome that? I thought the answer possibly yes, but last weekend they just didn't have a chance.
No, they didn't catch. And, you know, like you see, we brought out what's wrong and this and that. It's fascinating, but then it's frustrating when you look at a guy like Dallas Wilson from Florida, who's a freshman, first game, and Dallas Wilson is what the Sark and everybody thought that this receiving core would be. Catch that's what they anticipated that what a freshman was supposed to look like, and that's what an elite one looks like, right? And and that's what is lacking, right? You don't have anything like that, and all it took was one game for him to bounce in. And you go, holy crap, who the hell is that dude, right?
He was the best player on the field.
But yes, and then Texas has guys who they anticipated would be their Dallas Wilson, and it hasn't come close. It hasn't even looked anything like that, right? That's the crazy part about it. And like I said, we can get into some of the stuff that was offensive line when we start talking about playmakers, this and that. I mean, that to me, when I look at that, I'm like, where is that over here? Where is that here?
I think the wide receiver discussion is a really interesting one because you and I can go back about a year and a half-ish to when this was a thing that was starting to build behind the scenes, which is You and I both know a prominent personal wide receivers coach. There's a million of them out there.
Sure.
But we had talked to one who has a reputation for developing and coaching high-level wide receivers nationally. And this guy was very honest when he was like, hey, man, I don't know if I can tell any of my guys to go to Texas. I need to tell them, you go someplace else and ball out and then go to Texas. But he was saying, why would I tell these young kids that I work with that they should sign with Texas when Texas is just going to go out into the portal? And specifically, this was coming off of the Adonai Mitchell blocking the pathway of Jonte Cook that season. And then the next year, when Worthy and Mitchell go to the NFL, they brought in Matthew Golden, Isaiah Bond, Silas Bolden. And it was like, where are the wide receivers who are coming out of high school? When is Parker Livingston supposed to get on the field? When is Jonte Cook supposed to get on the field? When is Aaron Butler supposed to get on the field? Like, these guys aren't getting their chance. And you and I both know this existed. And Sark and that group were recruiting last year at wide receiver. And they were like, to hell with you guys telling us we can't go get 5-star wide receivers. Watch us. So they went out and got those guys. And we know the criticism that if they had recruited those guys and then taken a bunch of portal guys to go along with that group, we know what would have been said and what they were worried about. You bring in Jamie French, you bring in Dalen McCutcheon, you bring in Khalil Lockett and Michael Terry, and then those guys can't get on the field. We know what it would have sounded like. And I'm convinced Sark will never say it. But Sark didn't go into the portal because he promised those guys that he would not block their pathway. It's the only way he would have gotten them because schools were using that pitch against Texas. If you go to Texas, you won't play. They'll bring you in, they'll sit you on the bench, and they'll bring in older transfers every year and just keep them ahead of you. So what did Sark do? Sark punted. He punted on the only thing that's ever worked for him in his entire career, which is my offense is struggling. Go buy a bunch of fast, badass dudes in the portal. It's what got him to the playoffs in 2023. It's what got him to the playoffs in 2025. They don't even make the playoffs without those wide receiver additions in the portal. And then for them, I'm mystified at this choice that Sarkisian made to no longer go after super fast guys. That was intentional because he doesn't even have the job at Texas without having arguably the most dynamic, fastest group of receivers in college football history.
Yeah.
He's not at Texas without John Mechie, Jalen Waddle, and then Smith, the Devontae Smith, the Heisman winner. He's not at Texas without those guys. He's not at Texas. And he wouldn't even have his job right now if for the last 2 years he didn't have 4-3 guys all over the place. So I'm mystified that they went away from the thing that made him and then went away from the thing that made him enjoy the most success that he's ever had as a head coach, all because he wanted a bunch of unproven players at a position that has an incredibly high bust rate. There's no position in college football when it comes to elite level recruits that has a higher bust rate than wide receivers. It's scary. They're either first round picks or those dudes disappeared or never seen from again. It happens. It's 50-50. So, and it's not even 50-50. It's more like 30-70. I cannot believe that he punted on the things that worked best for him. And again, when we start talking about the other elephant in the room is you did all this to keep people from getting in the way of your freshman receivers, and they can't get on the field.
That's the thing that doesn't make any sense. That's why I went to the Dallas Wilson
catches for 12 yards.
That's why I went to the Dallas Wilson example. I'm like, okay, if you do that, then you have to have a Dallas Wilson kind of result. And right now, I mean, you know, Ryan Wingo is there, and sometimes he makes a couple catches a game. You can mark down 2, you can mark down a couple for Parker, and then all your young guys. None of those guys can see the field. There's not a single one of the Khalil, all the guys you mentioned, French, Terry, they like none of those guys can have an impact. Like, I want to know what's literally what force field is holding those guys back from getting on the field, because we're not seeing a lot.
You know what it was, Anwar?
Hmm.
Those guys didn't show up till August. So wait. No, never mind. They were all here in January, so no excuses there.
Yeah, and if your whole thing is, well, we're just waiting for Emmett Mosley to get healthy to give us 2 catches. Well, that's not a plan. And so
it's such a disingenuous lie too, because
yeah,
it ignores what he's really good at. I thought we saw it on Saturday. He gets open and he catches the football. That's what he does. And you know what? If he can stay healthy and have no issues from that hamstring for the rest of the way, he's going to be good for like 4 catches for 60 yards every week, which is good. But that guy needs to be your number 2 or your number 3 wide receiver. They don't have a number 1, and right now they don't have anybody playing like a number 2. They got a bunch of guys that they talk about as they can be those guys, but they haven't been.
They're complementary receivers at this moment.
Ryan Wingo's a gadget guy that right now deserves to have the ball thrown to him 2 or 3 times a game on a really good team, right? If he's playing for this Alabama team right now, he's not the leading receiver. He's not the Bernard or the Jeremy. Is it Jeremy Bernard? He's not that guy, the kid that transferred from Washington. He's a guy that on a really good team you take some shots with, but the personnel's just all wrong. And
it's a personal wrong catch. It's like, I know this might be a chicken.
What they're trying to do, yes.
This might be a chicken or an egg kind of question, right? It's a personal wrong, or maybe 2 things could be true, or is the low key thing is guys just weren't developed this offseason in the way that we've seen development in previous years.
I think the answer is yes. Both. Mm-hmm. I mean, those 2 things are existing. It's part of the complexity of how do you fix what's broken right now. There's so much broken. You know what? I think it's hard to identify your ass from your elbow when it comes to what pieces do you pick up and analyze. And this is the question I wanted to ask you. Is there anything from what we were told from sources earlier before the season that you think in retrospect you didn't pay enough attention to?
One thing that jumps out is that the defense was dominating the offense in scrimmages and throughout offseason practice, right? I think that jumps out because it was one of these things I would say towards the middle of spring of the scrimmage, probably the second one. I was like, well, I know it's basically crazy, but one thing I would like to hear is that Arch is, kind of killing it in the scrimmages, right? But you gave them the benefit of the doubt and said, all right, well, you know what? The defense typically has the upper hand, and
and it happened last year. That's exactly the same thing happened a year ago, and they made the playoffs in a semifinal.
Yeah. So you tell yourself, okay, well, because you remember, there were people sometimes when I report that we were like, listen, man, I think you're overreacting about this offense. Like, who told you that? Come on, man. Nah, you don't know what the hell you're talking about. And they're like, this offense is fine, right? And so, you know the story, obviously, Catch. Can't say the story, but you know exactly. Wink, wink. And so I would say taking that into
you guys just need to know that there's a thing there, and Anwar just hinted to it publicly. And if I did that, he would chew my ass out if he was like, Catch, what are you doing?
But nonetheless, I would say that was one that stood out to me, that in hindsight, when we heard this offense wasn't doing well, should have caught my attention, a little bit more. That's the first one. The second one, there's probably some things that I think it's easier to explain. But I think the first thing that stands out, let's start there, the defense was so much better than the offense, and the offense wasn't doing good, and kind of excusing all of that because we just said, well, there was a benefit of the doubt that we thought, okay, well, we got to give them this, right? I mean, if they're saying it, and look, probably the second thing, Catch, you and I were really consistent on, man, you the whole receiver thing, like, man, you went out and got some badasses, and you're trying to tell us that these guys are going to replace those guys. If you say so, sure, but that don't really sound right. And that part is probably something that should have jumped out a little bit more too. But the hard part to Catch is when the team goes to the semifinals for 2 straight years, and you're like, man, I don't really know. When you question it and you throw it out there, everyone shoots you down, and you don't really have enough leg to stand on to say, well, I know for sure you're wrong. So sometimes you have to almost eat it. And now you could go. So those two, I would say now, when we questioned it before, then we got a shot down, and then we said, all right, well, let's just let it be. That's kind of, those two jump out for me. What about you?
Well, I think, look, what I'm about to say is, I think, a horrible indictment on me, but I think it's important to be honest, because what's happening right now is there are people who are like, Catch, Anwar, you guys need to have a staff meeting. Y'all need to talk about how shitty your sources are, and then y'all need to find some new sources.
But the thing, it's not the source isn't the problem.
Because it's what I was going to get to.
Okay.
At no point during the offseason, especially in August, if we were to want to frame it to they reported for camp and then all the way through, I don't remember a source ever telling us that Arch was cooking in any practice. It never happened. At no point in August did we ever report Arch cooked the defense. In fact, the conversation was a whole lot of, it's kind of a lot. Look, we had people who were so thirsty to defend the offense that when we accurately reported that Arch only threw 1 touchdown pass in a scrimmage, people were clamoring to other reports that our competitors were throwing out where it was like, no, Arch threw 3 touchdown passes to Ryan Wingo. And when we told people, our sources didn't tell us that. And then when Sark showed up the next time to do media availability, he didn't say any of that happened. At no point did we ever report the offense looks great. It just didn't happen. In fact, before camp even started, I wrote an article that said, can an offense be really good if the defense is always kicking its ass in practice? It was just, it's a theory I've had, and people were like dismissing it out of hand where it was like, you're crazy. It's Texas is fine. Our sources were telling us ain't a whole lot happening on that offensive side of the ball. And Anwar, I think the elephant in the room is that the same thing happened last year. And because they went as far as they did, it was like, well, I guess you can't make a mountain out of the molehill about the offense not playing well, because when they get to the games, like last year, they proved they'll be okay. What I, in retrospect, am the most pissed at myself about is I straddled the line of, even though I thought Arch was going to have a great season, anybody that watches any show that I do knows that I said a couple of times this season he's going to have a stinker. And it matters what game that happens in. Does it happen against Georgia? They'll lose. Does it happen at home against, I don't know, Vanderbilt? They probably win, maybe. Now, who knows? But we did this thing where with a straight face we acknowledged, well, they're worse on the offensive line. They're worse at tight end. They're worse at running back. They're worse at wide receiver. But everything will be okay because if the quarterback plays well enough, it's the tide that lifts all of the boats to the promised land. And what I didn't do enough of was listen to my own brain say, well, he's still got to grow up. Saturday was his first career road start as a starting quarterback. Like This will be his first Texas OU game. He's never started in this game. He is going through firsts. And whether it was the ranking, whether it's the last name, whether it's confirmation bias and all of the things that happened last season, if you just say it out loud now, it sounds stupid. Hey, as long as the really inexperienced guy that hasn't started an important game in his entire collegiate career can make up for worse O-line play, worse tight end play, worse wide receiver play, worse running back play, and worse coaching as it would have it, as long as that guy can do that, they'll win the national championship. And in retrospect, it just sounds fucking stupid. And I'm mad at myself for knowing, deep down, I should have known. That's unreasonable, right? And I let myself get caught up in the scope of the roster and what they've done 2 years in a row and all of the young talent. And, oh, by the way, we probably should have made more note of the fact that, this team only has 25 combined seniors and juniors. That's not really the way teams win national championships in football. Vanderbilt will bring 25. They have like 20-something grad seniors. So they're not even including their 4-year seniors or their juniors. They've got as many grad senior upperclassmen as Texas has in the entire program, just in grad seniors. So in retrospect, there were just signs, and I'm mad at myself because intellectually I knew they existed. I wasn't blind. I ignored them, and that's worse than being blind.
So can I say one thing and then go on my end, because I've kind of talked a little bit on my end, right? I think the other thing too is sometimes when we look at it, it's like, to your offense, but I think when you look at the super blue chip things, right? You tell yourself, well, they have more super blue chips than all these other programs, so therefore that somehow equates to success, right? And then sometimes it's like, yeah, but what do you do with those guys, right? And so you can have them, you can stack them. Can you coach them up?
And Texas has had a ridiculous high hit rate in Sark's early tenure. They are hitting on so many more than they've missed. There's two ways to look at that. A, you can do what I did, which is then give them benefit of the doubt that more are going to hit at the same level of high rate. Or you regress to the mean a little bit because there's a reason why the mean is the mean. And, you probably get caught in between those two lines of thought.
Yeah, but the thing is, because when people talk about sources, right? I always use this analogy, right? And so people give like Mel Kiper a hard time. It'll give him a hard time when he says someone's going to be really good and the person doesn't, and maybe it's a bust. And my retort to that is always, I can't get mad at Mel, because Mel is not an NFL team that has all the resources in the world to get it right. The team, it's a bigger indictment on the Raiders or the Bucks or the Cowboys or whatever someone missed, because you put all the time and effort and the resources and went to the combines and did all the interviews and you looked at the tape and you studied it and you did all these things. You made them into a first-round draft pick. And then with all of that effort, that person was the bust. It's a bigger indictment on you than it is the single individual does the evaluation. I look at it as the people who are there and watch the practices catch, and they have to trade out, and they come out of it saying we're good, right? That it's more on them. So you can't say we'll find quote unquote better sources, right? Because there's not a single outlet out there that reported that this offense is going to be trash. Arch Manning is not going to be who he's lived up to be, and the defense would falter against Florida. Everybody who spoke to anybody within the building, so it's not the sourcing is not the issue, it's the confirmation bias for people who watch something and they tell themselves, yeah, you know what, Arch is going to be better than Quinn. Hell yeah, he's going to be better than Quinn. Look, I saw him make, and it may only be 2 throws, but it's all you need to see.
It's the Matthew Caldwellism, though, right? Like,
yes.
Hey, did you see Matthew Caldwell throw that ball?
Correct. Right?
Like, he should be the starting quarterback. Did you see it?
It was on SEC Shorts this morning. It was pretty funny.
That was pretty funny.
And that's like Matthew Caldwell's like, I got a shout out like on SEC Shorts. Like,
so did Orange Bloods though for the exact same thing.
So I think it's more so on that, and then it goes back to then kind of where we started, which is Sark and everybody thought going into the season, Catch, we're good. We got it. We got everything covered. We've got this offensive line. It's straight. Because Catch, if they would have anticipated that this offensive line would be as bad as it was, well, obviously they would have addressed it in the portal. I mean, they would have. They
didn't see it.
They didn't see it coming. They saw it with the defensive line and said, oh, yeah, we got to stack that. But from the offensive line, it's almost they prided themselves on this mantra a little bit, Catch, which is, man, you know what? You know what our streak is? We don't got to go into the portal to get offensive linemen because we plug and play over here. And it was almost like, hey, badge of honor. Yeah, man, this is what we do. And in hindsight, they were absolutely wrong, specifically about the interior, but they're absolutely wrong about that. They thought to themselves, man, if they thought, man, we ain't going to have a receiver that's doing anything this year, they would have gotten more than Emmett Mosley. And clearly they would have, if they knew, man, 5 games into this season, week what is this, technically week 6 or 7 because there was a bye, that our leading running back or the leading rusher is going to be Arch Manning, and it ain't going to be by a whole lot, and it's not like, oh, Arch has 500 yards. They would have said, you know what, CJ Baxter's kind of struggled to stay healthy. You know, we got Christian Clark, he's coming off of injury as well. Jared Gibson, he's still young. Maybe we should get somebody who's a little proven at that position. But they went through everything in the offseason. They went through all their evaluations, and Catch, quite honest with you, they just didn't see it coming.
This is just my opinion. And then we're going to knock out super chats because they're stacked up. And then you got to go. So we got to act fast. But it's my opinion that Sark didn't go get a running back in the portal because he loves CJ Baxter and didn't want to block the pathway of a guy that he loves who was returning from a major injury. And I just feel like there's a CJ Baxter blind spot that Sark has, because it's ludicrous that they had 6 healthy running backs. 2 of them were coming off of major injuries and only one of them was remotely proven, and none of them have burst and speed. And they were like, nah, we're good. Not doing anything. Ruben, $5 super chat says, should the O-line coach be on the hot seat? Can penalties be corrected at this point?
I don't know if I will say this. My hesitation on hot seat with the Kyle Flood, get rid of him thing is, I don't know if one season is enough for me to say I'm done with Kyle Flood. You know what I'm saying? Like, I feel like he's done what he needs to do. I think ultimately, now this year has not been a good year for him. I just don't know if this year somehow negates the last 3 or so good season, with the exception of the first season, right? So that's where I'm like, I don't know, Catch. That's a harder one for me.
It is. Look, there's a reason why in the NFL, the player personnel department is separate from the coaching staff. What the player personnel department's job is to improve the talent by any means necessary, wherever they can find margins. It ain't show feelings, it's show business. And what happens is when you let coaches dictate personnel, even in the slightest degree, they've made promises, they've said things, they've got confirmation biases. You have to have a strong internal structure to be able to say, we're bringing in this guy to be the starting left guard. And if the coach says, whoa, I got a guard, and I like him a lot, and I promised him he was going to get his chance, there has to be a structure in place. It's like, well, our job's not to, it ain't show friends. It ain't show the kid you like playing time. It's to put the best players on the field, period. And so I don't blame Sark for this offensive line issue beyond development, beyond initial selection as prospects and recruiting. I would not have blamed, I said this in my 10 thoughts, I wouldn't have blamed Brandon Harris for this because I wouldn't have given him credit had they decided to go for the portal. Like, I think Sark is making these decisions. The buck stops with him. I'm fascinated to see what it sounds like at the Monday press conference today. What kind of inquisition do we get on some of these things? Anwar can't ask every question. Sailor Joe for $2. Spread off and play some 5-star wide receivers we recruited. I'd like to see. I think he means spread out.
Spread offense. I think he means spread offense.
But yes, I'm with you, Sailor Joe. I'm with you. Barb's 10. Hold on, Barb's. I clicked on the wrong one. Give me a second. Brian for $1.99 says, need more players who play physical like Nick Townsend, the true freshman tight end. Okay, sure. I have nothing to dispute with that. Barb says for $10 or for $5, sorry. So did Sark prioritize the wrong receivers, or did UT just get out recruited for the best wide receivers? Same about running back, offensive line / defensive line.
I mean, I don't know if he got out recruited because those guys were still elite recruits. I think what the question is more so about the development of said guys more so than anything else. But I don't think all the you tell me, Catch, all the receivers that they have were guys that other programs wanted. Now they did miss on a couple of guys, but I don't know if we're is DeCorian Moore. Do we look at that and say that's the issue? I mean, they missed out on Michael Hudson a couple of years ago. That's not an issue. I
had said I would trade every guy they took at receiver last year for one DeCorian Moore. That I felt like there's 6-star receivers who get 5-star rankings, and then there are 5-star receivers, a guy like Jamie French, who's really, really talented and good, but at no point did I ever think, oh, that guy's better than anybody else in the country. There are layers to this. They prioritized the wrong receivers in the portal because they didn't really prioritize any this year.
Yeah.
They didn't really get out recruited for the best receivers, unless you want to say they got out recruited for DeCorian Moore. That happened. DeCorian Moore just decided he liked Oregon better than Texas. And then they tried to get in on Dallas Wilson, and Dallas Wilson flipped late, went to Florida after having been committed. Oregon almost got Dallas Wilson and DeCorian. And I don't know that you would say that Florida out recruited Oregon. They won. So maybe that's means the same thing. I do think they prioritize the wrong running backs. Like, where the fuck is the speed? When did Sark get tired of having guys that could go from 0 to 60 in the blink of an eye? Because I want you to know, man, I watch the Cowboys play every weekend. I want more fast dudes. Can't have enough of them. Can't have enough of guys that just run by dudes. And Texas really right now doesn't have any of them.
It's, everyone has their like white, what is it? Is that white? What is that thing? White whale? Yeah. And I don't want to steal this thing, but the CJ Vogel's thing has been Texas hasn't had a carry over 20 yards since like last year. I forget if it was one of the playoff games or something like that. That's the last time Texas has had one carry that's gone past 20 yards. Like that in itself, I wish CJ would ask about
Texas
that.
Doesn't have a running back this season that's gained more than 18 yards on a single run. Brian.
And by the way, Catch, and that's with Sam Houston State, UTEP, and San Jose State on your schedule.
It might not happen. Rome 77 says elephant in the room is Cook was the only guy we had in the mold of a Golden or Mitchell Spider-Man receiver with fluidity, artistry, with wide receiver 1 mentality.
And the only thing is, Rome, it potentially, but I think Jonte was going through a lot of things personally that I don't know if he would have ever realized it here at Texas. Sometimes a fresh start is good for someone. Like, I think we can't ignore that Jonte went to Washington for like a week, right? And then there was, some arrests there. There was a lot going on with Jonte, and I think thank God he's got a fresh start for him. Like, it's at Syracuse, but Texas wasn't working. I think Jonte had some personal things he had to work out.
Yeah, I'm not Rome. There's some buses that will drive over people this week for sure. but it won't be the Jonte Cook bust. Like that just is one of them things. And sometimes both sides need to change. And look, man, the good news is, at least for Jonte, that like he's not disappeared into the wasteland of guys that coulda, woulda, shoulda. He's picking up the pieces, and I will continue to root for him. And hopefully he keeps surging. Brian, with one of the questions of the elephants in the room, why spend money on players who need so much development like Brandon Baker? On D-line, spend on impact players and not 5 OK players?
I mean, listen,
Brandon Baker will have probably received in the ballpark of about $1.5 million for his first 2 years on campus. And Texas hasn't gotten that kind of money's worth.
No.
And Sark has got to learn. Sark, we've talked every year, Sark tweaks a little bit of like what he thinks about the portal versus high school kids. We've seen them adjust to a model where I think they're taking fewer high school kids because they realize at Texas it takes 2 or 3 years to get on the field, and guys won't stay around that long, and it gets to be a really hard process to even create successfully. But the Brandon Baker conversation is one they definitely started having last year when it was like, hey, we got a guy who's going to get 700-ish thousand this year in NIL, and he ain't playing. And in retrospect, should we take a risky high school offensive lineman with a really shiny sticker price, or should we take no chances? And I think, Brian, we're doing this in real time, and I'm curious what Steve Sarkisian will say in December about this exact same question, because it looks like they should have spent the money on Michael Fasusi. It doesn't look like they should have spent the money on Brandon Baker. But Brandon Baker might still end up being a really good NFL player when it's all said and done, and maybe a really good college player. But in the first 2 years where they've had to pay him more than 7 figures to have him on campus, the payoff it hasn't been good.
They should, in retrospect, they should have gotten Pregnon.
Oh, yeah. And I think had they known that there wouldn't be any more Pregnons that would come through the portal, I think they would have given that guy $2 million. I think they thought, we won't do Pregnon now because we don't want it to impact negotiations with some of our own players, but we'll get the next Pregnon. And don't worry, we'll do that. And then another Pregnon never entered the portal because teams were suddenly flush with cash. And the one thing they weren't letting was letting their all-conference offensive linemen or defensive linemen go out the door. And then you end up in a situation where there was never another Emmanuel Pregnon that they targeted and said, let's go get him by any means necessary. I do have some sympathy for what happened there, but the bottom line is the bottom line. Clay Davis says the biggest problem is O-line and running backs. Arch flashes talent, but is a B- quarterback this year. I don't know if he's a B-, if I'm being completely honest. CJ Baxter is now a massive bust, period. Can't rely on him.
Well, I mean, the thing is, though, I mean, he was a 5-star, right? So it's kind of hard when a guy's
Baxter was a high 4-star by most people.
I thought somebody had him as a 5.
I think On Three may have had him, but Rivals didn't. And I did not think CJ Baxter was a super blue. If you'll remember, I constantly said I thought Christian Clark was the better running back in that class. And it just, he gets injured and we didn't quite see it unfold that way. But I've never been the biggest CJ Baxter fan. I don't know that it's fair, though, to say he's been a massive bust so far. He ain't on the field. Yeah. And he missed all of last season. So in the context of he was a really highly recruited guy that Sark committed so much to, yes, but there has to be an asterisk with a little bit of an explanation. And sometimes an excuse is just the reason why something happened. But there are some mitigating circumstances with CJ Baxter that feels unfair to completely call him a massive bust. But Clay, I feel you, man.
What's crazy is that he had CJ Baxter starting ahead of Jonathan Brooks. Like that's how much he loves CJ.
That's what I'm saying. I think his CJ Baxter thing impacted personnel decisions this year. Jesus, they signed a running backs coach that had a running back that would have started here. They wanted to go into the portal, and Texas was like, no, we don't want the player. We want the coach. I thought they were going to take the player. I thought that's the entire reason why they brought in the coach. Brent Williams says, for $4.99. Guys, seriously, are we throwing the season away? At least give a lot her quarterback a shot. Lots of issues, but quarterback is the hardest to maneuver around. I disagree, Brent. The offensive lineman is the hardest issue to maneuver around because even if you had a great quarterback, you're not going to keep him on the field with this offensive line. Arch Manning could be a Heisman favorite still, and they could lose him for the next 7 weeks because that group can't play well. You cannot keep a quarterback healthy on the field with this offensive line. That's the hardest to maneuver around. But I will also say, Brent, I'm not throwing the season away. But it's more likely at this point that they go 7-5 or 8-4 than 10-2 and 9-3. But I do think a 9-3 team is making the playoffs this year. I think there's going to be carnage every weekend in the rankings. I think what we almost saw a year ago with Alabama, I think we're going to see this year. But I say that not with like the hope and dreams that Texas is that 9-3 team. I'm just saying I think a 9-3 team might make the playoffs this year. Texas could still go 9-3, but oh boy, they got.
I mean, that's the hard part, though, Catch. What Saturday showed you was that it's going to be really hard for Texas to go 9-3.
Oh yeah.
I mean, because we already built in losses to Ohio State and Georgia, right? And so we haven't gotten to what's crazy is Texas has an easier SEC schedule, but we haven't gotten to the hard part of that schedule for Texas. Like we've seen the struggles against bad teams, non-Power 5 teams, and then one of the worst SEC teams that are out there. We haven't gotten to Oklahoma, Mississippi State. I mean, I don't know what Kentucky is or isn't, right? But then Vanderbilt. We haven't gotten to what's going to look like for Georgia, and we haven't gotten to Texas A&M. So that's the hard part. When you start saying, "Oh, don't throw the season away," what have you seen within the first 5 games that gives you the hope and belief that there's only one more loss ahead, and this team is good.
2 more super chats, and then we got to go. We don't want Onward to be late on the 40. Brad C says, it's 9:54, and technically it's 10:09. And OU, oh, never mind. He's not in the mood. Yeah, man. I feel you, Brad. Hang in there. Trills Max says, for $4.99, I warned everybody about Dallas Wilson. He's another Jeremiah Smith type of player. Trills, he was on Saturday. And, again, I thought he was the best player on the field, period. I wonder if Sark went home and said, do we have a Dallas Wilson that we're just not playing? I don't know. There are worse questions to ask. And finally, Longhorn football edits for $10. I'm a very positive fan. However, I am so pissed at the O-line play with Texas resources and the portal era. Just completely unacceptable. The offensive line talent evaluation scares me now.
Well, yeah. I mean, that's fair. All because, as we keep saying, they knew what was on campus. They looked at it and they said, we're good. This will, and really, I'll be honest with you, Catch. One of the most disappointing things about it, and we did talk about this early in the year, didn't hammer it at all, but going into the Arch Manning era and not surrounding him with as much talent as possible at all the positions almost seems like malpractice in some ways. That to have that guy. Is your dog? Oh, to have that guy wait in the build up for that, and then at that point say, you know what, we're not going to get you any top-notch receivers. We'll get you one tight end out the portal. We're not going to make sure you have the best offensive line available. We're not going to make sure you have the best running backs out there. Like if there's a time to spend, right, it's usually would be when that guy's going to take over, and not doing that ends up being one of the things that if they don't turn it around, it'll be things that we talk about all throughout the offseason.
Guys, y'all put me in one. It's time to get ready for Steve Sarkisian's press conference. Anwar's got to go to the 40 acres. We've caught up on super chats. I'm about to take one of these bad boys. Just might as well, in honor of Rogue Shop, I'm going to take one of these 250 milligram gummies and just see where it takes me for the noon show and everything that follows the rest of the day. For myself, for Anwar, for Rogue Shop, and trust me, Richard probably in the chat right now on tilt like everybody else. Everybody just wants the team to be good. Can we have nice things? Maybe not. Guys, we'll see you soon. Hit that thumbs up button on the way out the door. Subscribe to the page. We're over 150,000 subscribers. Really cool. You guys take care.